Dukakis not only opposes the death penalty, he allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton, who murdered a boy in a robbery, stabbing him 19 times. Despite a life sentence, Horton received 10 weekend passes from prison. Horton fled, kidnapped a young couple, stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend. Weekend prison passes. Dukakis on crime.
Good morning and welcome to AM Joy. That was the infamous Willie Horton ad that aired during the 1988 presidential election. The ad, deployed by George H.W. Bush to attack Michael Dukakis' record on crime, helped to sink Dukakis' candidacy with a blatant appeal to the racial fears of white voters. And Saturday, amid the government shutdown, Donald Trump took a page from that same playbook when his campaign released this ad attacking Democrats on immigration.
That's illegal immigrant Luis Bracamontes, charged with murdering 2 police officers. It's pure evil. President Trump is right. Build the wall. Deport criminals. Stop illegal immigration now. Democrats who stand in our way will be complicit in every murder committed by illegal immigrants.
Let's bring in Maria Hinojosa, host of NPR's Latino USA, Republican strategist Evan Siegfried, Republican political consultant Shermichael Singleton, and Jennifer Rubin of The Washington Post. And Maria, your reaction to that ad?
Actually, when I first saw it, I said, well, they're right on point. They know exactly the message that they're getting out, and they're hammering that message. But can we look at the actual data in terms of the polling? And of course, polling is difficult. But right now, about 80% of the American public and the majority of Republicans basically support DACA. So in some ways, that's contradictory with what we're seeing with that imaging, that very effective imaging, because they are hitting it on the target, that Latinos, immigrants of all types are criminals. But what they're not understanding is that it's going to have another impact. There are people who are basically saying, I mean, what they're doing is that they are looking out in their community and they're saying, wait a second, we have all of this immigration around us. Is it really this terrible? So they're basing their decision-making, how they feel about DACA, on reality as opposed to that kind of imaging. But I asked, when we were talking for a second, I said to Evan, where's the Democratic messaging in response? Where is the Democratic? What is the message? Because the DACA young people right now are quite devastated. You know that, Joy.
Of course.
And I'll just end by saying, trying to flip it, they are actually giving us a lesson in extraordinary American spirit because they're American kids.
Yeah.
What do you do in the United States? You hold firm, right?
Yeah.
So they are actually doing self-care, which is something so deeply American, and they're just going to work every day.
Yeah. And you know, Evan, as that is happening, as you have DACA kids, you know, I think it's 150 a day are losing their DACA status while this debate is going on. You have Republicans who are literally going right back to the playbook of Brown Scare. It was Black Scare when Lee Atwater was doing the Willie Horton ads for George Herbert Walker Bush, and now it's Black Scare. And Benjamin Wallace Wells has a really great piece in the New Yorker, and he talks about the fact that the shutdown is not just about the shutdown and funding the government. It's about who gets to be an American. And here's a little clip from he says, much of the intensity and the darkness of the 2016 presidential campaign evolved from the challenge Trump and the Republicans raised to the basic matter of identity, of who counts as an American and under what terms. A central question regarding the Dreamers. Neither side could put aside the Dreamer issue because it captures the essential argument of the Trump era, and on this, Republicans and Democrats do not agree. Is it wise, in your view, as a Republican strategist and a millennial Republican strategist, for Republicans to essentially run on brown people are rapists, murderers, and killers, and therefore do not belong in America?
After Steve Scalise was shot in June, you and I had a heated debate about what is acceptable in tone and when we're discussing the issues. And I said it's really wrong for anybody to say one side wants to kill other people or is responsible for that. The same applies here. That ad is disgusting, it's racist, it's fear-mongering, and it's a giant dog whistle. And we're going to pay the price as a party in the long term because the country is becoming more and more diverse. At the same time, the president talks about how important illegal immigration and confronting it is. But he isn't confronting it. He's doing things that aren't even conservative. He talks about how we need a wall. Well, he said since he took office, illegal border crossings on the southern border are down 73%. At the same time, he's not confronting what has accounted for 42% of illegal immigrants in the United States and 2/3 since 2014, which are visa overstays. You could just have to fly into JFK, LaGuardia, LAX, and you just overstay your visa. The president hasn't talked about it at all. Then with the wall, he abandons conservative values and conservative principles when he says, we're going to build a wall. He doesn't talk about how he's going to have to seize tons of private property from Americans using eminent domain, which conservatives are rightfully up in arms about. But he says, oh, it's not going to be a big deal. I know how to build, and eminent domain's a lovely thing. That's not conservative. It's just a guy who's obsessed with a wall, and somehow the Mexicans are rapists, and every Democrat has Chuck Schumer, or every illegal alien who commits a crime has Chuck Schumer on their shoulder saying, do it, do it.
Well, we're going with undocumented immigrants. I think we're going to go with that instead of illegal. I mean, we're trying to change the conversation around it, right? And there's certain terminology, even like chain migration and illegal aliens. Is it throwback conversation that does feel like, it feels almost like the 80s. I'm going to go to Shermichael Singleton on this because, you know, Republicans very skillfully used anti-blackness, fear of black men, in order to take, you know, sort of deeply ingrained, hidden, you know, phobias inside of white voters that they may not have even been comfortable voicing out loud. It was sort of what the Archie Bunker character was about, that he voiced some of these things. And they used that to move voters in their direction. Lee Atwater said, first you say N-word, 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 but then you start saying we want lower taxes and we want less regulation, and you move the conversation. But deep down, what you're really doing is race talk. How can Republicans... What do you think Republicans think they can get out of this? They've already got a majority of white voters voting Republican. Right. Is this a growth strategy for the Republican Party, or is this just, in their mind, a way to temporarily win this shutdown?
Well, Joy, it's definitely not a growth strategy. And when I look at that ad, it reminds me of something that Hungarian-born sociologist Karl Mannheim wrote nearly 80 years ago. And that is that voters or people are willing to suspend their own criticisms, questions, and concerns about the veracity of what a politician says if the politician takes the complexities of politics and policy and turns them into simple, reductionist approaches that most people feel resonates with them, that most people feel sort of back their current beliefs or their biases or their ignorances about people. And this isn't a new phenomenon in politics, as you mentioned, the George H.W. Bush campaign. However, what it shows, Joy, is that the Republican Party, at least under President Trump, is out of touch with the changing demographics of the country. If you look at trends, 5 or 10 years from now, you won't just see major cities where there will have large minority populations, but a lot of those suburban areas, a lot of rural areas, middle America will have more Hispanics now if you look at trends. And so as a strategist, I look at those numbers and I have to ask myself, how can we have an electoral advantage going forward? And if we continue these types of strategies that you see coming from the Trump campaign or the Trump administration at an accelerated rate, I do not believe the Republican Party will be able to maintain some level of competitive advantage electorally going forward. And that's something that should concern the party, because you don't think about elections a year or two from now. You think about elections in the long term, and I don't think we're currently thinking that.
Yeah, and Jennifer, you know, there were different ways that Republicans could go on the shutdown. I mean, Eric Trump has just gone out and said the shutdown's great for us, right? So they don't seem to have a coherent way of responding to the Trump shutdown, you know, trending and all of that. There are a couple of choices. This is Eric Trump doing the shutdown is great for us with Jeanine Pirro on Fox News.
You look at this whole government shutdown, and the only reason they want to shut down government is to distract and to stop his momentum. Honestly, I think it's a good thing for us, you know, Judge, because people see through it.
Okay, so that was one choice. It may not be wise for the second son of Donald Trump to go out and admit that they think it's a politically advantageous strategy, but that's one way to do it, to say, you know what, you're just distracting from how great things are to Donald Trump. Option two is to go right to this sort of race-based xenophobic argument that the Democrats just want the criminal aliens in the country. And here's an excerpt from the Trump campaign statement on that ad that we played at the top. And it says here, Donald Trump was elected president to build the wall and keep American families safe from evil, illegal immigrants who commit violent crimes against lawful U.S. citizens. Yet 1 year after Donald Trump's nomination, Chuck Schumer and the Democrats continue to put the interests of, quote, illegal immigrants over those of Americans. Our new campaign ad draws attention to the stark contrast between complicit Democrats, borrowing the Democrats' complicit line, and the president for his full commitment to build a wall and fix our border and protect Americans from drugs, murder, and other atrocities. And they even, one more thing, added that message to the government-controlled and taxpayer-funded voicemail at the comment line at the White House. Let's play that.
Thank you for calling the White House. Unfortunately, we cannot answer your call today because congressional Democrats are holding government funding, including funding for our troops and other national security priorities, hostage to an unrelated immigration debate.
What do you make of the choices that they've made in terms of those two ways they could have gone?
Let me just say, it should be self-evident why I think any reasonable person can no longer identify with the Republican Party. That parade of lies and racism tells you that the Republican Party has now been reduced to a single issue, which is race xenophobia. Listen, I think it is in their interest to make this not about Dreamers. By the way, the messaging on Dreamers has been great because about 90% of Americans want them here and understand that these are not criminals. By definition, you can't be a criminal and be a dreamer. They want to make this about race. Listen, this is, in some sense, playing into the Democrats' hands because what was their issue? What was their argument? The president blew up a deal on Dreamers, which everyone likes, made a racist statement, and these people are using this to try to muscle through the wall and other things. So I don't think in the long run that helps them. More importantly, I think it just shows the ugly face of the Republican Party to the American people. And I think it's gotten to the point where, frankly, if you are supporting these people and you are enabling them, then you have to take ownership of their racism. You have to take ownership of that kind of rhetoric. Every member of the Senate who doesn't denounce this, who goes along with the president, who says, oh, this is just about security in the wall, they need to own that kind of language. It's not until they are held responsible for that virulent, disgusting racism that you're going to shake any of them loose. And right now, I think they're getting a free ride. They're getting a free ride from the press. They're getting a free ride from the voters, and that should stop.
Absolutely. And, you know, at the same time, Maria, you know, statistically, in the years from 1990 to 2013, immigration went up by a third, unlawful migration up by a third, undocumented. Crime went down by half. Right. So it's actually just factually it's wrong. But what do you make of the fact that Republicans have now thrown off the veil of supporting the Dreamers? Because they've up to now been saying, we, too, love the Dreamers. Donald Trump has been saying we want love for the Dreamers. And now they are attempting to conflate the 800,000 or so Dreamers with the entire 11 million or so undocumented population and criminalize them all together.
We've been watching this happening since July of 2015. We've been trying to say this kind of language, this kind of dehumanizing language has real consequences, not on how you feel emotionally, but now we're seeing in regards to policy. Mm-hmm. So we cannot separate, sadly, and it's so painful to have to talk about this, not only as a journalist, but as an American, but as a Mexican immigrant, right? Which is that the racial animus that we see from the White House is having specific consequences in terms of policy.
Yeah.
It's clear. But I want to tell you something. The conversation that I had yesterday morning in upstate New York with a guy who's a Republican, white guy in his mid-30s, and he said to me, what I'm doing is I'm leaving the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. Exactly. He said, I can no longer identify as a Republican. So the long haul in terms of the party, again, I was thinking this morning, I was like, you know, there are probably even, I know this is going to be a little bit, there are probably some DACA members or some DACA recipients who are Republicans. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be Republicans for a long time. And that's a damaging thing just for the party and for democracy in general.
And you often tweet statistics on millennial voters and how Republicans are losing them. This is why, right? This
is part of why. You know, I've been asked many times, why haven't I left the Republican Party? Because I'm very upset with several of the things that are happening in it. I don't leave the Republican Party because I'm not going to surrender the party that I love and believe in to these racists and allow them to put forward such things. If they want to have that as their party platform, they're going to have to fight me at every step, and other Republicans. To push back on what Jennifer was saying, though, about the Republican Party is rotten to the core, I would say younger Republicans who are sticking it out are actually much more reflective of tolerance and being able to work together. And that's not what the rest of the party is.
So, I'm going to just give the last word to Shermichael on this, because as a black Republican, this has to be especially difficult for you to explain.
I mean, Joy, it is, and I have never tried to explain it, and I will not try to explain it. Do I hold conservative views? I absolutely do, and I think most of my friends and associates are aware of that, but there is nowhere in the world I'm going to acquiesce and just go along because Donald Trump is the leader of the party. Values matter, character matters, morality matters, ethics matter, and I cannot, in good conscience and good faith, disregard every single thing my parents and grandparents raised me to believe just because Donald Trump is now president. I'm not going to do it, and I don't think, and I hope others don't do it in the future. Again, as the previous guest has stated, the Republican Party is going to have to own up to this, Joy. You look at congressional numbers right now, and it looks like Democrats will likely take back the House later this year, and that would be in sync with historical precedent anyway. And if you look even further than that with the next presidential election coming up, I'm not even certain that Donald Trump will be able to win, and that's going to be bad and detrimental to the Republican Party.
Yeah, I think Republicans are making a gamble that xenophobia and racism work now the way they worked in the 60s and 70s. I'm not so sure they are right. We will certainly find out in November. Maria Hinojosa, Jennifer Rubin will be back. Thank you so much, Evan Siegfried and Shermichael Singleton.
Thanks, Joy.
Thank you. And up next, the 2018 Women's March and what effect it will have on the midterm. Stay with us.